Everyone expected a perfect royal fairy tale. But no one saw this coming. Because behind the ceremony, behind the cameras, behind the centuries-old protocol, something far more intimate unfolded, something only a handful of people witnessed, and even fewer understood. This is the story of Princess Leonor's imagined royal wedding, told from the inside. Not the version presented in polished photographs or carefully edited broadcasts, but the whispered, emotional, deeply human version that unfolded in quiet corridors, guarded dressing rooms, and midnight strategy meetings. A version where the future Queen of Spain wasn't just a symbol, but a daughter, a sister, a young woman trying to steady her heartbeat on the most overwhelming day of her life. It began hours before sunrise, when the palace was still half asleep and Madrid's streets lay in a soft, bluish haze. Inside the royal residence, however, people were already moving. Stylists quietly unpacking cases, advisors checking schedules, tailors making micro-adjustments to fabrics worth more than cars. And at the center of it all, Leonor sat alone near a window, watching the first hints of daylight touch the horizon. Everyone thought the nerves would be about the ceremony. But Leonor's mind was somewhere else entirely. And this is where the first curiosity loop opens, because while the world saw a poised young royal ready to step into history, something was weighing on her. Something unresolved. Something that threatened to change the tone of the entire day. And the only person who sensed it early was her sister, Sophia. Sophia entered quietly, her voice soft, asking only 4 words, "Are you ready, Leo?" A simple question, but it unlocked something. Leonor exhaled slowly, as if she had been holding her breath for hours. And instead of answering, she handed Sophia a small folded note. Why a note? Why not just say the words out loud? That's where the layers begin. Because the message inside wasn't meant for a room full of advisors or a team of stylists, it was meant for family. For someone who had known her whole life, not her whole schedule. Sophia read it, paused, then looked up with an expression that mixed shock with protective instinct. And this is where the story steps deeper, because whatever stood between Leonor and the perfect wedding morning wasn't a matter of logistics. It was a matter of the heart. Hours later, as the palace swelled with activity, the preparation rooms transformed. Cameras rolled, staff hurried, every detail had to be flawless. But what made this wedding different wasn't the protocol, it was the emotional undercurrent running beneath it. When Queen Letizia entered the room, she saw it instantly. A mother knows what genuine nerves look like. And Leonor, despite every etiquette lesson, every royal responsibility, every moment of practiced composure, was still carrying something heavy. Letizia placed both hands on her daughter's shoulders. Not as queen to heir. Not as instructor to apprentice. But as mother to daughter. She didn't ask what was wrong. She simply said, "It's your day. Not Spain's. Not Europe's. Yours." That was the first turning point. The first emotional release. And yet, the tension didn't fully lift. Because there was something else, another curiosity loop, still unresolved. Another layer waiting to be uncovered. As the morning progressed, family members began to arrive. Some brought warmth. Others brought political complexity. Royal weddings, after all, are not just ceremonies, they are diplomatic stages where history and emotion collide. One particular relative, someone known for a colder, more analytical demeanor, entered with an energy that shifted the entire room. Conversations paused, advisors exchanged glances, and Leonor's posture changed just slightly, enough for Sophia to step closer, remaining within arm's reach. Why did this relative's arrival matter? Why did it affect Leonor so deeply? That answer would not unfold until much later, near the reception, when private truths finally came to light. But for now, the tension sat quietly beneath the surface, influencing every interaction. The dress fitting was next. The gown, intricate, symbolic, meticulously crafted, was more than fabric. It was a statement, a connection to Spain's history. A bridge between Leonor and centuries of monarchs. Yet as it was fastened, something unexpected happened. Leonor's hands trembled, only for a moment, but enough for the chief attendant to pause. "Cold?" she asked. "No," Leonor whispered. "Just thinking." Thinking about what? That becomes the next loop. Because the thought wasn't about vows or music or ceremony order. It was about someone who hadn't arrived yet. Someone important. Someone whose approval mattered more than protocol or press coverage. Meanwhile, Outside the palace, thousands gathered. Flags waved. Children sat on parents' shoulders. Reporters spoke into microphones with exaggerated excitement. And still, inside, the wedding's emotional core remained hidden from the public eye. As the final preparations wrapped, the time came to leave the room. The cameras were waiting. The world was waiting. But before stepping into the corridor, Leonor paused. Sophia squeezed her hand. Letizia nodded softly. And the door opened. The moment Leonor appeared, the palace came alive. Advisors straightened. Guards adjusted posture. Musicians lifted their instruments. Yet beneath her composed exterior, the internal story continued, each curiosity loop quietly weaving toward its resolution. When she reached the grand hall, she saw him, the groom, waiting. His expression softened immediately. And for the first time all morning, Leonor allowed herself a genuine, unguarded smile. But even that smile held layers. It wasn't just love. It wasn't just commitment. It was relief, because whatever had weighed on her earlier had finally found its answer. And the answer, as the ceremony would later reveal, came from the one person who had arrived late but had arrived at exactly the right moment. And here comes the next unfolding. Just as Leonor prepared to walk forward, a palace aide slipped a small message into Sophia's hand. She read it, leaned forward, whispered into Leonor's ear, "He's here." Everything changed. The tension evaporated. The uncertainty dissolved. That missing approval, the one Leonor needed before taking her steps into marriage, had finally come. The doors to the chapel opened. Music rose. And Leonor walked not as a conflicted young royal, but as someone finally anchored. The ceremony itself blended grandeur with intimacy. The vows carried the weight of tradition but were exchanged with the softness of two people who had built their own story beyond palace walls. The guests watched, some teary, some calculating, some lost in thoughts of their own. But behind the scenes, where the cameras weren't allowed, another story continued unfolding. The late arrival, the emotionally significant figure, sought out Letizia first. Their conversation was quiet, private, filled with nods that carried decades of family history. It wasn't until much later, after the ceremony, that he finally approached Leonor. She turned, saw him, and for the second time that day, the future queen's composure nearly broke. His words were simple, "You did it. And I'm proud of you." The tear she fought back never fell, but the relief radiated through her entire posture. As the newlyweds moved into the reception, the palace transformed into a world of celebration. Laughter echoed. Glasses clinked. Musicians played. Royal families exchanged polite diplomatic pleasantries while guests whispered their own theories about emotional moments they caught glimpses of but could not interpret. But the most powerful moment came hours later, after the official photographs, after the dances, after the protocol-heavy greetings. Leonor slipped away for a moment of quiet. And there, on a balcony overlooking the glowing city, the groom joined her. No cameras. No advisors. Just the two of them, standing above Madrid, breathing in a day that had changed both their lives. "What were you thinking this morning?" he asked. And this was the final loop closing. Leonor answered softly, "I was afraid something important was missing. But it wasn't. It was simply late." He smiled, took her hand, and the weight of the crown, the heritage, the expectations, all of it felt lighter in that moment. The wedding became more than a royal event. It became a story of love strengthened by emotion, supported by family, shaped by history, and carried by a future queen learning how to balance duty with heart. And behind every iconic image the world would later see, there existed this deeper, more intimate story, one woven through early morning fears, family complexities, whispered messages, and a quiet balcony under the Spanish night. A story very few would ever know, until now.